I never thought I'd find my husband's car parked outside my best friend's house. Not at 7 p.m. Not when he told me he was working late, and definitely not when I had just spoken to Evelyn that same morning, my best friend for over 30 years, and she told me she was feeling under the weather and needed to rest. But there it was. Same license plate, same little scratch on the rear bumper, Richard's car, quietly sitting in her driveway like it belonged there. My heart dropped. You know that kind of sinking feeling in your stomach where something clicks, but you pray you're wrong? That was me, standing frozen in the cold outside the house of the woman who once held my hand at my wedding, and the man who vowed to never hurt me. But what I found inside was far more than I was prepared for. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a tangled web of secrets buried for decades, a truth that involved not only my marriage, but my family, my daughter, and a decision that would change all our lives forever. You think you know the people closest to you, until one day you don't. Would you forgive your best friend if she crossed the line once or twice, or for 20 years? Before we begin this story, let me ask you, what would you do if the two people you trusted most were lying to you the whole time? This story might shake you, but it just might heal something inside you too. And if you're ever pressed for time or need to come back later, hit subscribe now so you don't miss this story, or others just like it. True, raw, and unforgettable. Now, let me take you back to the day everything began to unravel. It started with laughter. Always laughter. Evelyn and I met in college, the kind of friendship that sticks through heartbreaks, bad perms, weddings, and funerals. She was the maid of honor at my wedding. I was the godmother to her cat, Tinsel. We had inside jokes that made absolutely no sense to anyone else, including our husbands. One time, she locked herself out of her house wearing nothing but a bathrobe and fuzzy slippers, and still insisted we go for pancakes. That was Evelyn. She wasn't just my best friend, she was my chosen sister. So when my phone rang one Wednesday morning, and I heard her tired voice say, "Margie, I think I'm coming down with something. Don't come by today, okay?" I didn't question it. I just told her to rest and that I'd swing by tomorrow with soup and those lemon shortbreads she loved. What I didn't know was that the person who would visit her that day wasn't me. Richard and I had been married for 33 years. We weren't perfect, but we were solid. He snored. I talked in my sleep, a fair trade. He made terrible coffee. I made excellent excuses for being late. That's marriage. But lately, things had shifted. He was working late more often. He changed his passcode. He even started wearing cologne again, the fancy one he used to save for anniversaries. When I teased him about it, he chuckled, kissed my cheek, and said, "Can't a man try to impress his wife?" And for a moment, I believed him. God help me. I did. Then came Thursday. I was driving down Maple Ridge, the quiet street where Evelyn lived, when I saw it. Richard's car, parked right outside her house. The engine was still warm at first. I told myself, maybe he's dropping off something for me. Maybe it's a coincidence. Maybe I'm overthinking this. But then I saw the curtains shift, and I saw his silhouette, and I knew my hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped my keys. I sat in the car for what felt like forever, watching the house that once felt like home. To me, that yellow porch swing, I helped Evelyn paint it. The rosebush by the mailbox. We planted it together on her 40th birthday. Suddenly, it all looked unfamiliar, foreign, like a set piece in a cruel play I hadn't auditioned for. I wanted to scream. I wanted to kick the door down. But instead, I drove away. Not because I was a coward. You ever had your heart break so quietly, it doesn't even make a sound? Just a slow, hollow ache in your chest that settles in like fog. That's how it felt. Like being erased. That evening, I tried to act normal. I asked Richard how his day went. He said, "Uneventful." I nodded, poured him a glass of wine, and excused myself to the laundry room where I sat on the floor and cried into a basket of warm towels. Even in that moment, a ridiculous thought crossed my mind. At least the towels smelled like lavender. Sadness and humor. Funny how they tangle sometimes. If you've ever felt like life flipped the script on you, like the people you loved were suddenly strangers, then you know the kind of ache I carried into bed that night. And if this story speaks to you even a little, you might want to tap subscribe so you can come back later or hear more stories like this one. Raw, real, and too often untold. Because what happened the next day was something I never imagined, not even in my darkest dreams. It didn't happen all at once. There wasn't a fight. No shouting, no slammed doors or broken plates. It was quieter than that. Subtle like a slow leak in a tire. You don't notice at first. You just realize one day you're not moving the way you used to. Richard started spending more time at the office. Late meetings, early flights. "Don't wait up," became his favorite line. At first I believed him. We were in our 60s. People our age didn't cheat, right? We watched detective shows together. We bought groceries together. We even argued over which type of paper towel to buy. Who would risk all of that for what lust? But love, or whatever you want to call it after 33 years of marriage, can be funny. It blinds you. Even as it slowly fades, he became distant. I'd ask how his day was, and he'd say, busy. When I told him Evelyn's cat passed away, he barely looked up from his phone. This was the same man who once cried at a commercial about abandoned puppies. At night, he stopped reaching for my hand. He still said I love you, but it felt scripted, like a line he'd memorized, not something he felt. And the worst part, I started shrinking myself, talking less, needing less, becoming less, just to keep the peace. One night, we went to a neighbor's dinner party. Someone joked, "You two still look like newlyweds." Richard laughed and said, "Well, she's still the boss. I just pay the bills." Everyone chuckled. I smiled too, but inside I felt like a ghost wearing my own skin. I tried to reignite things, planned a weekend getaway, cooked his favorite lasagna, the one with the extra cheese, even though my cholesterol didn't approve. I even bought a new nightgown, bright red, bold. He noticed none of it, but he did compliment the barista at Starbucks that morning. "Nice earrings," he said. "Red suits you." I stood beside him, holding his latte. There were moments I thought I was imagining it all, like the time I opened his phone to set an alarm and saw a message preview. "Miss you already." No name, just those 3 words. He snatched the phone before I could read more. "Work thing," he mumbled. And God help me, I let it go, because part of me wasn't ready to know sometimes. Denial is easier than devastation, and sometimes heartbreak doesn't come crashing down, it creeps in through the cracks. When no one's looking, I started journaling again. Little entries like, "He didn't kiss me goodbye." He left his phone face down again. I missed the man who used to laugh at my dumb jokes. I also wrote lists. By dog food mail, birthday card, to Lisa figure out why I feel so alone in a house that used to feel full, and yet we still watched Wheel of Fortune. We still took turns doing the dishes. We still said goodnight. Isn't that strange? How 2 people can keep dancing long after the music has stopped? If you've ever felt that silence, that space between you and someone who once held your whole world, then you understand what I mean. And if this story is starting to sound familiar, go ahead and tap subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, because what came after was the moment everything I feared became real. It was a Thursday. The kind of Thursday where nothing feels urgent and everything feels the same. Laundry, coffee, bills. I was dusting the living room cabinet, the one that holds all the forgotten gifts and thank you cards, when I saw it, a velvet box, deep green, tucked behind a stack of holiday napkins. I opened it, not expecting anything, maybe an old brooch from Aunt Claire, or a watch Richard never wore. But inside was a necklace, a delicate gold chain with a heart-shaped pendant set with a tiny sapphire dot. Simple, elegant, but definitely not forgotten. I recognized it instantly. It was the same necklace I had picked out last Christmas while shopping online. With my best friend Denise, I had said, "Isn't this lovely?" And she had smiled that wide, sparkly smile of hers. "You should hint at Richard," she had said. "Maybe he'll finally get you something that's not a toaster." We laughed. I added it to my wish list, but it never came. I stared at the necklace. Now, confused. Richard hadn't given it to me. I never bought it, so why was it here? I checked the receipt in the box. The shipping address wasn't ours. It was Denise's, then crossed out. And our address written below in shaky pen? Something inside me went cold. I felt like I had stepped into a room I wasn't supposed to be in, only it was inside my own house. I didn't want to believe it. I really didn't. So I did something I hadn't done in years. ISNOOPED. Not proud of it. But I opened his laptop, and there they were, emails, photos, messages. One said, "Last night was unforgettable. I still smell your perfume on my jacket." Another, "She has no idea. I feel guilty, but also more alive than I've felt in years." And there, in the subject line of one email to my one and only Denise, my best friend since college. The woman who helped me through childbirth, who held my hand at my mother's funeral, who made deviled eggs every Thanksgiving even when nobody asked for them. That Denise. My heart didn't break all at once. It cracked slowly like ice under pressure. Each word I read sent another fissure down the middle. I slammed the laptop shut. But the betrayal? It didn't stay inside the screen. It seeped into the air, into the walls, into every quiet moment we'd ever shared. That night, I made spaghetti. Richard said, "Smells great." I nodded. He ate 3 bites before asking, "Did you change the sauce?" I looked at him and said, "No, but I changed everything else." He laughed. Thought it was a joke, but it wasn't. Nothing was the same anymore. Later, I stared at myself in the mirror. Not at my face, but at my eyes, searching for the woman I used to be, the one who trusted, the one who believed in love stories that last forever. She was still there, but her eyes were sharper now, clearer. Have you ever had one of those moments where something so small, a necklace, a receipt, a name on an envelope opens a door you can never close again? If you've ever trusted the wrong person, if you've ever been blindsided by someone you loved, you're not alone. Tap subscribe so you don't miss what came next, because trust me, the next chapter is where things stop being quiet and start getting loud. I didn't sleep much that night. Not out of sadness, but because something in me had woken up. Something sharp, quiet, focused. For 27 years I had trusted Richard. Now, I needed to know. The next morning I told him I was going to visit my sister in Vermont. She broke her ankle, I said casually, sipping coffee. He barely looked up from his phone. Give her my best, he muttered. That was the confirmation I didn't want, but expected. No questions, no concern. He was already somewhere else emotionally, maybe even physically, so I packed a bag, not to leave, but to hide it in my car just in case. Then, I began to follow him. It's funny how predictable people are when they think no one's watching. Richard was a man of habit. Monday, office. Tuesday, golf. Wednesday, errands. But that Wednesday his errands led him to a small cafe. On the other side of town, I parked across the street, sat low in my seat like some amateur spy in a rom-com, and then she walked in. Denise, wearing that ridiculous red scarf I had given her for her birthday, the one she said made her look too dramatic. Apparently she changed her mind, or maybe she was always dramatic behind my back. They hugged. Longer than friends do. He kissed her temple. She touched his chest. They laughed over lattes like high school sweethearts. I snapped a photo, then another, not out of spite, but clarity. I needed proof, not for court, not for revenge, but because someday when I'd doubt myself, I wanted to remember that I wasn't crazy. Later, I followed them to a park. They walked slowly. She tossed leaves at him like we used to do in college. He caught one, stuck it in her hair. I almost laughed because it was so painfully cliché. I thought I might be watching a bad TV movie then. Something happened that broke me a little more. They sat on a bench. Denise leaned into him and said loud enough for me to hear, "She's gotten so boring, hasn't she?" He chuckled and said, "She's like an old chair, comfy but not exciting anymore." That was the moment I stopped feeling like a wife and started feeling like furniture. I drove home in silence. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just sat in the garage listening to the engine tick as it cooled. You'd think betrayal feels like fire, but no, it feels like ice, quiet, creeping. Paralyzing that night? "I served dinner again," he said. "This stew's great. What's the spice in it?" I smiled. "Paprika. And a little vengeance." He laughed. "Vengeance? That's new. Oh, you'd be surprised. What's brewing?" "In this kitchen." Later, while folding laundry, I found one of his socks with lipstick on the ankle. Bright red, Denise's shade, firecracker. She had once left it in my bathroom. How poetic, right? I kept it in a box labeled Truth. At that point, I had choices. Scream, fight, confront. But instead, I chose clarity. And sometimes, clarity means waiting, watching. Because some people don't just fall. They dig their own hole, one lie at a time. Have you ever pretended not to know something? Just to see how far someone will go? Let me tell you, it's chilling, but it's also powerful. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever sat quietly with a truth burning in your chest, subscribe so you won't miss what came next. Because soon, Margaret doesn't. Just wait, she strikes. And when she does, you'll want to see every second of it. It started with an innocent text from Denise. "Dinner at my place Friday, just a few friends." Richard says, "You've been stressed. Might do you good." I stared at the screen. The audacity. My best friend, my husband, their lies. Now served with wine and hors d'oeuvres. I took a deep breath and replied, "Of course, looking forward to it." Because some battles are not won with screaming, they're won with silence, timing. And the right dress. Friday came. I wore red, the exact same shade as Denise's signature lipstick, firecracker. I let my hair down, wore heels. I hadn't worn heels in years. Even Richard did a double take when I walked into the living room. "You look, wow," he said. I smiled, comfortable but exciting. He blinked, but didn't respond. Denise opened the door with a fake smile so wide I thought it might crack. "Maggie, you look stunning." She kissed my cheek, too close. I smelled his cologne on her. Inside. People were laughing, sipping wine. The table was beautifully set at one corner. Richard sipped bourbon like nothing was wrong. His wedding ring still on, still shining. We sat, We smiled. We talked about books, local politics, the weather, and the whole time I watched them. Little glances, quick touches, inside jokes only lovers have. Then came the moment Denise stood and said, "Richard, why don't you carve the roast? You're always so good with knives." Her voice dripped sugar. Mine dripped something else. "I stood, actually," I said, holding up my wine glass. "I'd like to make a toast." They all turned. I looked at them, one by one. Then my eyes landed on Richard and Denise. "To friendship," I said. "To loyalty. And to those who lie so well, they forget who's watching." The room fell quiet. Denise coughed. Richard set down the carving knife. A little too fast. "Oh, don't mind me," I said sweetly. "I just admire people who can look you in the eye and betray you at the same time. It's practically an art." Denise forced a laugh. "Maggie, are you okay? Am I okay?" I walked slowly toward her. "Oh, honey, I'm fantastic." Then I dropped it. The photo right there? On the dinner table? Denise in the red scarf? Richard holding her hand gasps. Silence. Someone's fork clattered. Denise turned pale. Richard stammered. "This isn't what it looks like," he said, voice shaking. "Oh. Then maybe you'll explain it to all of us. Maybe start with what exactly you two were doing in a hotel 2 weeks ago." She opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. "It just happened, Margaret. I didn't mean you didn't mean to sleep with my husband." I laughed loud and clear. "That's the funniest thing you've said tonight." Richard stood. "Maggie, let's talk. Privately." "Oh, now you want privacy? Where was that when you were sneaking around behind my back?" People were now awkwardly leaving the table. One woman whispered, "God, this is better than Netflix." I turned to her. "Don't worry. The next episode gets even better." And then I left, head held high, dignity intact. Heart shattered, but not broken, because in that moment I had taken back control. Sometimes the loudest thing you can say is simply refusing to be silent. If you've ever had to sit at a table with people who smiled while stabbing you in the back, subscribe now. You're not alone, and what comes next will show you just how strong you really are. It was Sunday afternoon. The house felt emptier than ever. I was folding laundry when the front door slammed. "Mom," Claire's voice rang through the hallway. Sharp, shaky, full of something I hadn't heard in years. Anger. She stood there, holding her phone, cheeks flushed, eyes glossy. My daughter, 27 years old, brilliant, stubborn, always trying to fix what's broken. But today, she didn't look like someone trying to fix anything. "Is it true?" she asked. Her voice cracked. "Is Dad sleeping with Aunt Denise?" I froze. My hand still gripped the towel. "I was folding Claire," I whispered. "I didn't want you to. Don't lie to me." Her voice shook. "I saw the photos. I heard it from 3 people. Mom, she's your best friend, my godmother, and Dad." She stopped, covered her mouth like she might throw up. I sat down slowly. "I was going to tell you when the time was right. There is no right time for this, Mom." She collapsed into the chair across from me. Tears spilled freely now. "I grew up thinking we were solid, that no matter how boring or crazy things got, we were real." I reached out, but she pulled away. She stared at the carpet, then said, "I confronted Dad." My stomach tightened. "He didn't even deny it," she whispered. "He said he was confused, that he still loves you, but that he's changed." I asked him why Denise, and you know what he said? I shook my head. He said, "Because she listens." Claire laughed bitterly. "What kind of excuse is that?" We sat in silence, and then she dropped the final bombshell. "I'm cutting them both off. Dad, Denise, I'm done." "Claire," my voice cracked, "you don't have to choose sides." "Yes, Mom, I do," she snapped. "Because if I don't, I'm just pretending this didn't happen." Then came the silence, the kind that feels permanent. She looked at me, eyes full of betrayal, not just toward her father, but the whole illusion. "I hate that you had to go through this," she whispered. I nodded. "And I hate that you had to find out like this." She finally let me hug her. We cried together, not just because of Richard and Denise, but because something in us both had shattered, and we knew no matter how many holidays came and went, our family would never look the same again. That evening, Claire packed her things and went back to her apartment. Before leaving, she turned at the door and said, "You were always the strong one. Mom, I hope someday I can be like that too." I watched her drive away, tears streaming down again. I had lost a marriage, but maybe, just maybe, I was gaining something else: truth, clarity, and the fierce loyalty of a daughter who chose to stand by what's right. If you believe loyalty should never be confused with silence, hit subscribe to stand with those who speak the truth, even when it hurts. Your voice matters. It was 6:42 a.m. The sun hadn't fully risen. I was sipping weak coffee in a quiet kitchen when my phone rang. The screen flashed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something a chill in my chest made me answer, Mrs. Sutton. Yes, this is Memorial General Hospital. Your husband, Mr. Richard Sutton, has been admitted. My heart skipped. He's had a stroke. He's stable, but you should come. I stood still. The silence around me pressed against my ears. Richard Stroke. Hospital. The man who destroyed my trust. Now lying helpless in a sterile room, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I simply grabbed my keys and drove at the hospital. The nurse led me to room 314. There he was. Wires on his chest. A tube in his arm, pale, motionless, small. I hadn't seen him this way since Claire was born, when he held her with shaking hands and whispered, I don't know how to be a father. Now he looked like a man who didn't know how to be anything at all. The nurse said he'd lost speech temporarily. Paralysis on one side. He'll recover, she said. But he'll need support. Support from whom? I sat beside his bed. He opened his eyes, saw me. Tears welled up, his mouth moved. No words, just one hand twitching slightly, reaching toward mine. I didn't take it. I stared at the man. I once loved the same man who shattered our home with whispered lies and lipstick on his collar. But here's the strange part. I didn't feel hate. I felt grief. Not for the marriage. That was gone. But for what we used to be. The memories. The Christmas mornings. The time he built Claire's treehouse even though he was afraid of heights. The nurse returned later with papers. He listed you as his emergency contact and power of attorney. I laughed. Out loud, he cheated. Lied. Destroyed trust. And still expected me to show up when the world fell apart. I walked out of the room, stood in the hallway, and cried harder than I had in months. Not out of sadness, but conflict. Could I care for the man who betrayed me? Would that make me a fool? Or was it something deeper, something braver? That night I called Claire. She said, only one thing. Do what gives you peace, Mom, not what people expect. I lay awake until 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, haunted by a truth I couldn't run from. Even broken hearts still beat with love. The next morning, I returned to the hospital. Sat beside Richard again. This time, I held his hand. I'm not here as your wife, I whispered. I'm here as the woman who once loved you. You hurt me, but I refuse to let your darkness make me bitter. His eyes closed. A tear rolled down. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's armor. It says, you don't get to define me even after everything. I didn't know if I'd stay or walk away after he recovered, but I knew this. I would choose healing over hatred, dignity over revenge, grace over silence. If this story touched you, please subscribe to follow more emotional journeys full of pain, truth, and hope. You never know which one might feel like your story. It had been a whole year since the storm passed, since betrayal shattered the home Margaret once built with trembling hands and quiet dreams. Now, the house was quiet. Not empty, peaceful. Margaret had kept the garden blooming. Painted the living room a soft, hopeful green. She learned how to fix the sink herself. Taught herself how to dance again. Just her and the radio on Sunday mornings. She didn't wait for apologies anymore. She didn't ask for explanations, and most of all, she no longer needed anyone's permission to smile. Richard had made it through the stroke. Margaret helped him through rehab, quietly and kindly. Then she left. Not out of anger, but because she finally knew she deserved more. Claire visited often. They cooked, they cried sometimes, but mostly they laughed. Margaret even started volunteering at the local shelter. She read to seniors who couldn't see well anymore. One of them called her Sunshine, and it stuck for the first time. In decades, Margaret wasn't living to survive. She was living to feel free. But then, one Thursday afternoon, as she was folding warm laundry, the phone rang. She almost let it go to voicemail. But something, that strange pull in the chest again, made her answer. Hello. A malevoice.com/gentle. Hi. Is this Margaret? Woodard? Yes. This might sound odd, but my name's James Langley. I believe you knew my mother, Emily Langley. Margaret froze. Emily. Her college roommate. Her first best friend. The one who disappeared after graduation. They'd lost touch decades ago. One letter unanswered. One life going one way, the other another. Margaret's voice trembled. I haven't heard that name in over 40 years, James continued. My mother passed away recently. Going through her things, I found letters, dozens written to someone named Margaret. She never sent them, but she wrote to you every year on her birthday. Tears formed instantly. Margaret had no words. She wanted to find you. Said you saved her during her darkest time in college. Said she regretted losing you, and she left something for you. A pause. Then James added, she also wrote this. If you're reading this, James, and you find Margaret, tell her she was the light I carried into motherhood, and if she ever needs family, you'd be that for her. Margaret couldn't speak. Her heart was pounding. After everything, the pain, the betrayal, the silence, this one phone call restored something no apology from Richard ever could. Hope, connection, a sense that she was never truly forgotten. James asked if he could visit. Bring the letters. Bring a photo album, Margaret whispered. Yes. Then, thank you. That night, Margaret lit a single candle, sat on the porch, looked up at the stars. Emily, she said softly, I missed you, but somehow you found your way back to me. The wind rustled the leaves gently, like laughter, like forgiveness. A new chapter was opening, not romance, not revenge, but something deeper. A second chance at family, through an old friend's son, and the love that never truly left. If this story touched you, if you've ever lost someone and dreamed of one day reconnecting, subscribe to our channel to explore more stories like this. Stories of pain, yes, but also of healing, redemption, and the little miracles we almost stopped believing in. As someone who has spent years studying family dynamics and the quiet storms behind closed doors, I can tell you this: betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Often it wears a familiar face, a friend's smile, a husband's silence. But what matters is not just what broke us, it's what we chose to become afterward. Margaret's story reminds us, no matter how late it seems, no matter how long we've walked in pain, healing is possible. Not perfect, not without scars, but real. And sometimes the most unexpected people, like the son of a long-lost friend, can show up at just the right time to remind us we were never truly alone. What about you? Have you ever been betrayed by someone you trusted with your whole heart? Or found unexpected healing in a moment you didn't see coming? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help someone else heal too. And if this story moved you, if it made you think, cry, or smile, even for a moment, don't forget to subscribe. That way, if life pulls you away, you can always come back to finish the story or discover the next one waiting just for you. We've got many more stories coming, some heartbreaking, some uplifting, but all rooted in the truth we often leave unsaid. Tell us, should Margaret have forgiven Richard? Or walked away sooner? We'd love to hear what you would have done. Until next time, take care of your heart and never stop believing that, even after the deepest pain, a new chapter can still begin.